Hmm. The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari by Robin Sharma. Chapter 1. The Wake Up Call. He on the ground like a helpless infant, shaking and shivering and sweating like a maniac. Everything seemed to move in slow motion from that point on. My God, Julian is in trouble. His paralegal screamed, emotionally offering us a blinding glimpse of the obvious curls dangling over Julian's ruby red face, offering him soft words of comfort, words that he obviously could not hear. I had known Julian for 17 years. We had first met when I was a young law student, hired by one of his partners as a summer research intern. Back then, he would had it all. He was a brilliant, handsome, and fearless trial attorney with dreams of greatness. Julian was the firm's young star and the rainmaker in waiting. I can still remember walking by his regal corner office while I was working late one night and stealing a glimpse of the frame quotation perched on his massive oak desk. It was by Winston Churchill and it spoke volumes about the man that Julian was. Since day we are master of our fates, that the task which has been done is to talk. He was tough, had hard driving, and willing to work 18 hours days for the success he believed his was destiny. I heard through the grapevine that his grandfather had been a prominent senator and his father a highly respected judge of the federal court. It was obvious that he come from money and that there was enormous expectations weighing on his Armani-clad shoulders. I will admit one thing though. He ran his own race. He was determined to do things his own way, and he loved to put on a show. Julian's outrageous courtroom theatrics regularly made the front pages of the newspaper. The rich and famous flocked to his side whenever they needed a superb legal tactician with an aggressive edge. His extracurricular activities were probably as well known. Late night visits to the city's finest restaurants with sexy young fashion models, or reckless drinking escapades with the rowdy bands of broker he called his demolition team, became the stuff of legend of the platform. I still can't figure out why he picked me to work with him on that sensational murder case he was to argue that first summer. Though I had graduated from Harvard Law School, his alma mater, interned at the firm, and my family pedigree reflected no blue blood. My father spent his whole life as a security guard with a local bank after a stint in the Marines. My mother grew up unceremoniously in the Bronx. Yet he did pick me over all the others who had been quietly lobbying him for the privilege of being his legal gopher on what became known as the mother of all murders trials. He said he liked my hunger. We won, of course. and the business executive who had been charged with brutally killing his wife was now a free man, or as free as his cluttered conscience, conscience would let him be. My own education that summer was a rich one. It was far more than a lesson on how to raise a reasonable doubt where none existed. Any lower worth his soul could do that. This was a lesson in the psychology of winning and a rare opportunity to watch a master in action. I soaked it up like a sponge. At Julian's invitation, I stayed on at the firm as an associate, and a lasting friendship quickly developed between us. I will admit that he wasn't the easiest lawyer to work with. Serving as his junior was often an exercise in frustration, leading to more than a few late night outings matches. It was truly his way or the highway. This man could never be wrong. However, beneath his crusty exterior was a person who clearly cared about people. No matter how busy he was, he would always ask about Jenny, the woman I still call. Neglected his friends. The real problem was increase. The cases just kept on getting bigger and better, and Julian never wanted to back down from a good challenge. Continued to push himself harder and harder. In his rare moment of quiet, he confided that he could no longer sleep for more than a couple of hours without waking up feeling guilty that he was not working on a file. It soon became clear to me that he was being consumed by the hunger for more prestige, more glory, and more money. As expected, Julian became enormously successful. He achieved everything most people could ever want: a stellar profession reputation with an income in seven figures, a spectacular mansion in a neighborhood flavored by celebrities, a private jet, a summer home on a tropical island, and his prized possession, a shiny red Ferrari parked in the center of his driveway. Yet I knew that things were not as idyllic as they appeared on the surface. I observed the sign of impending doom, not because I was so much more perceptive than the others at the firm, but simply because I spent the most time with the men. We were always together because we were always at work. Things never seemed to slow down. There was always another blockbuster case on the horizon that was bigger than the last. No amount of preparation was ever enough for Julian. What would happen if the judge brought up this question or that question? God forbid. What would happen if our research was less than perfect? What would happen if he was surprised in the middle of a packed courtroom, looking like a deer caught in the glare of an intruding pair of headlights? So we pushed ourselves to the limit, and I got sucked into his little world centered world as well. There we were, two slaves to the clock, toiling away on the 64 floors of some steel and glass monolith, while most sane people were at home with their families, thinking we had the whole world by the tail, blinded by an illusory version of success. The more time I spent with Julian, the more I could see that he was driving himself deeper into the ground. It was as if he had some kind of death wish. Nothing ever satisfied him. Eventually his marriage failed. He no longer spoke with his father, and though he had every material possession anyone could want, he still had not found whatever it was that he was looking for. It showed emotionally, physically, and spiritually. At 53 years of age, Julian looked as if he was in his late 70s. Okay, the chapter's name I forgot. The Wake Up Call. His face was a mass of wrinkles, a less than glorious tribute to his take no prisoners approach to life in general, and the tremendous stress of his out of balance lifestyle in particular विशेष रूप से the late night dinners in expensive French restaurants, smoking thick Cuban cigars and drinking cognac after cognac, had left him embarrassingly overweight. He constantly complained that he was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Oh my god, what irony of sentence is this? He was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Oh my god. He had lost his sense of humor and never seemed to laugh anymore. Laugh anymore. laugh anymore. Julian's Julian's once enthusiastic nature had been replaced by a deathly somberness. Personally, I think that his life had lost all purpose. Perhaps the saddest thing was that he had also lost his focus in the courtroom, where he would once dazzle all over that present were an eloquent with an eloquent and airtight closing argument. He now droned on for hours, rambling about obscure cases that had little and no bearing on matter before the court, where once he would react gracefully to the objections of opposing counsel, he now displayed a biting sarcasm that severely tested the patience of judges who had earlier viewed him as a legal genius. Simply put, Julian's spark of life has begun to flicker. It wasn't just the strain of his frenetic pace that was marking him for an early grave. I sensed it went far deeper. It seemed to be a spiritual thing. Almost every day he would tell me that he felt no passion for what he was doing and was enveloped by emptiness. Julian said that as a young lawyer he really loved the law, even though he was initially pushed into by the social agenda of his family. The law's complexities and intellectual challenges had kept him spellbound and full of energy. Its power to effect social change has inspired and motivated him. Back then, he was more than just some rich kid from Connecticut. He really saw himself as a force for good, as instrument for social improvement who could use his obvious gifts to help others. That vision gave his life meaning. It gave him a purpose and it fueled his hopes. There was even more to Julian's undoing than a rusty connection to what he did for a living. He had suffered some great tragedy I had joined the firm. Before I had joined the firm, something truly unspeakable had happened to him, according to the one of the senior partners. But I couldn't get anyone to open up about it. Even old man Harding, the notoriously low-lived managing partner who spent more time in the bar of the Ritz-Carlton than his embarrassingly large office, said that he was sworn to secrecy. Whatever his deep dark secret was, I had suspicion that it in some way was contributing to Julian's downward spiral. Sure, I was curious, but most of all, I wanted to help him. He was not only my mentor, he was my best friend. Oh, and then it happened. The massive heart attack that brought the brilliant Julian Mantle back down to the earth and reconnected him to his morality. Right in the middle of courtroom number 7 on a Monday morning, the same courtroom where he had won the mother of all murders trials. Chapter 2. The Mysterious Visitor. It was an emergency meeting of all of the firm's members. As we squeezed into the main boardroom, I could tell that there was a serious problem. Old man Harding was the first to speak to assembled mass. I am afraid I have some very bad news. Julian Mantle suffered a severe heart attack in court yesterday while he was arguing the Air Atlantic case. He is currently in the intensive care unit, but his physicians have informed me that his condition has now stabilized and he will recover. However, Julian has made a decision, one that I think you all must know. He has decided to leave our family and to give up his law practice. He was he will not be returning to the firm. I was shocked. I knew he was having his share of troubles, but I never thought he would quit. As well, after all that we had been through, I thought he should have had the courtesy to tell me this personally. He wouldn't let me see him at the hospital. Every time I dropped by, the nurses had been instructed to tell me that he was sleeping and could not be disturbed. He even refused to take my telephone calls. Maybe I reminded him of the life he wanted to forget. Who knows? I will tell you one thing though, it hurt. It hurts, I mean. It hurts. It hurts. That whole episode was just over 3 years ago. Last I heard, Julian had headed off to India on some kind of an expedition. He told one of the partners that he wanted to simplify his life and that he needed some answer and hoped he would find them in the mystical land. He sold his mansion, his plane, and his private island. He had even sold his Ferrari. Julian Mantle as an Indian yogi, I thought. The law works in the most mysterious of ways. As those 3 years passed, I changed from an overworked young lawyer to a jaded, somewhat cynical old lawyer. My wife Jenny and I had a family. Eventually, I began my own search for meaning. I think it was having kids that it. They fundamentally changed the way I saw the world and my role in it. My dad said it best when he said, John, on your deathbed, you will never wish you spent more time at the office. So I started spending a little more time at home. I settled into a pretty good, if ordinary, existence. I joined the Rotary Club and played golf on Saturdays to keep my partners and clients happy. But I must tell you, in my quiet moments, I often thought of Julian and wondered what had become of him in the years since we had unexpectedly parted company. Perhaps he had settled down in India, a place so diverse that even a restless soul like his could have made it his home. Or maybe he was trekking through Nepal, scuba diving off the Caymans. One thing was certain, he had not returned to the legal profession. No one had received even a postcard from him since he left for his self-imposed exile from the law. A knock on my door about 2 months ago offered the first answer to some of my questions. I had just met with my last client on a grueling day when Genevieve, my brainly legal assistant, popped her head into my small, elegantly furnished office. There's someone here to see you, John. He says it's urgent and that he will not leave until he speaks with you. I am on my way out the door. Genevieve, I replied impatiently. I am going to grab a bite to eat before finishing off the Hamilton brief. I don't have time to see anyone right now. Tell him to make an appointment like everyone else and call security if he gives you any more trouble. But he says he really needs to see you. He refuses to take no answer for an answer. He refuses to take no for an answer. For an instant I considered calling security myself, but realizing that this might be someone in need, I assumed a more forgiving posture. Okay, send him in. I retreated. I probably could use the business anyway. The door to my office opened slowly. At last, it swung fully open, revealing a smiling man in his mid 30s. He was tall, lean, and muscular, radiating an abundance of vitality and energy. He reminded of those perfect kids I went to law school with, from perfect families with perfect houses, perfect cars, and perfect skin. But there was more to my visitor than his youthful good looks, and underlying peacefulness gave him an almost divine presence. And his eyes, piercing blue eyes that sliced clear through me like a razor, meeting the supple flash of a fresh-paced adolescent anxious about his first save. Another hotshot lawyer gunning for my job. I thought to myself, good grief, why is he just standing there looking at me? I hope that wasn't his wife I represent on the big divorce case I won last week. Maybe calling security wasn't a such silly idea after all. The young man continued to look at me, much as the smiling Buddha might have looked upon a favored pupil. After a long moment of uncomfortable silence, he spoke in a surprising commanding tone. Is this how you treat all your visitors, John? Even those who taught you everything you know about the science of success in courtroom. I should have kept my trade secrets to myself, he said, his full lips curving into a mighty grin. A strange sensation tickled the pit of my stomach. I immediately recognized the raspy, honey smooth voice. My heart started to pound. Julian, is that you? I can't believe it. Is that really you? The loud laughter of the loud laugh of the visitor confirmed my confirmed by confirmed my suspicions. The young man standing before me was none other than long lost yogi of India, Julian Mantle. I was dazzled by his incredible transformation. Gone was the ghost-like compensation. Gone was the ghost-like complexion, the sickly cough, and the lifeless eyes of my former colleague. Gone was the elderly appearance and morbid expression that had become his personal trademark. Instead, the man in front of me appeared to be in peak health, his lineless face glowing radiantly. His eyes were bright, offering a window into his extraordinary vitality. Perhaps even more astounding was the serenity that Julian ex- exuded. I felt entirely peaceful just sitting there, staring at him. He was not longer than the anxious type as a senior partner of a leading law firm. Instead, the man before me was a youthful, vital, and smiling model of change. Chapter 3. The miraculous transformation of Julian 40-year who now looked so vibrant and alive. I wondered in silent disbelief. Was it some magical drug that had allowed him to drink from an earth fountain of youth? What was the cause of this extraordinary reversal? Julian was the first to speak. He told me that the hyper competitive legal world that had taken it its toll on him, not only physically and emotionally, but spiritually. The fast paced and endless demands had worn him out and run him down. He admitted that his body had fallen apart and that his mind had lost his luster. His heart attack was only one symptom of a deeper problem. The constant pressure and exhausting schedule of a world class trial lawyer had also broken his most important and perhaps most human endowment, his spirit. When given the ultimatum by his doctor either to give up the law or give up his life, he said he saw a golden opportunity to rekindle the inner fire he had known when he was younger, a fire that had been extinguished as the law became a less a pressure and more a business. Julian grew visibly excited as he recounted how he sold all his materials possession and headed for India, a land whose ancient culture and mystical traditions had always fascinated him. He traveled from tiny village to tiny village, sometimes by foot, sometimes by train, learning new customs, seeing the timeless sight, and growing to love the Indian people who radiated warmth, kindness, and refreshing perspective on the true meaning of life. Even those who had very little opened their home and their hearts to this weary visitor from the west. As the days mantled into weeks within his enchanting environment, Julian slowly began to feel alive and whole again. Perhaps for the first time since he was a child, his natural curiosity and creativity spark steadily returned, along with his enthusiasm and his energy for living. He started to feel more joyful and peaceful, and he began to laugh again, although he embraced every moment of his time in this exotic land. Julian told me that his journey to India was more than a simple vacation to ease an overworked mind. He described his time in his faraway land as a personal odyssey of the self. He confided that he was determined to find out who he really was and what his life was all about before it was too late. To do this, his first priority was to connect to that culture's vast pool of ancient wisdom on living a more rewarding, fulfilling, and enlightened life. I don't mean to sound too off the wall, John, but it was like I had received a command from within, an inner instruction telling me that I was to begin a spiritual voyage to rekindle the spark that I lost, said Julian. It was a tremendously liberating time for me. The more he explored, the more he heard of Indian monks who had lived beyond the ages of 100 years. 100 monks who, despite their advanced years and maintained youthful, energetic, and vital lives. The more he traveled, the more he learned of ageless yogis who had mastered the art of mind control and spiritual awakening. And the more he saw, the more he longed to understand the dynamics behind the miracles of human nature, hoping to apply their philosophies to his own life. During the early stages of his journey, Julian sought out many well known and highly respected teachers. He told me that each one of them welcomed him with open arms and open hearts, sharing whatever gems of knowledge they had absorbed over lifetimes spent in quiet contemplation on the loftier issues surrounding their existence. Julian also attempted to describe the beauty of the ancient temples that were strewn across the mystical landscape of India, edifices that stood as loyal gatekeeper to the wisdom of the ages. He said he was moved by the scaredness of this surrounding. It was a very magical time of my life, John. Here I was, a tired old litigator who had sold everything for from my racehorse to my Rolex, and had packed all the remained into a large rucksack that would be my constant companion as I ventured into the timeless tradition of the East. Was it hard to leave? I wondered aloud, unable to contain my curiosity. Actually, it was the easiest thing I have ever done. The decision to give up my practice and all my worldly possessions felt natural. Albert Camus once said that real generosity toward the future consists in giving all to what is present. Well, that's exactly what I did. I knew I had to change, so I decided to listen to my heart and do it in a very dramatic way. My life became so much simpler and meaningful when I left the baggage of my past behind. The moment I stopped spending so much time chasing the big pleasures of life, I began to enjoy the little ones, like watching the stars dancing in a moonlit sky and soaking in the sunbeams of a glorious summer morning. And India is such an intellectually stimulating place that I really thought of all I had left. Those initial meetings with the learned and the scholarly and the scholarly of the exotic culture, though intriguing, did not yield the knowledge for which Julian hungered, the wisdom that he desired, and the practical techniques that he hoped would change the quality of his life continued to elude him in those early days of his odyssey. It was not until Julian had been in India for about 7 months that had he had first real break. It was while he was in Kashmir, an ancient and mystical state that sits sleep, sleepily, sleepily at the foot of the Himalayas, that he had the good fortune to meet a gentleman named Yogi Krishnan. This slight man was a clean-shaved had also had been a lawyer in his previous incarnation, as he often joked with a toothy grin, fed up with his active face that personifies modern New Delhi. He too gave up his material possessions and retreated to a world of greater simplicity. Becoming a caretaker of the village temple, Krishnan said he had come to know himself and his purpose in a larger scheme of life. I was tired of living my life like one long air raid drill. I realized that my mission is to serve others and somehow to contribute to making this world a better place. Now I live to give, he told Julian. I spend my days and nights at this temple, living an austere but fulfilling life. I share my realizations with all those who came here to pray. I serve those in need. I am not a priest. I am simply a man who has found his soul.